All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Family Office Info Live. I'm Danielle Patterson, CEO of Family Office List, and I'm thrilled that you've joined us for today's Lunch and Learn. We are going to be digging into a topic that more family offices are paying attention to than ever before: reputation, visibility, and how to shape your narrative. More families today are stepping into the public eye, not for the sake of visibility alone, but to attract aligned partners, champion their values, share their thought leadership, and guide the next generation. But how do you do that while still protecting privacy? What's too much exposure and what's just enough? To explore that, I'm joined by two true experts. Our first guest, Michael Thrasher, the founder and editor of Modus, a media platform covering family offices with a refreshingly candid lens. He's an experienced journalist who's worked with Institutional Investor, Business Insider, and more. He has a sharp eye on the narratives shaping the space. Welcome, Michael. Our second guest, Michael Walsh, brings over 25 years of experience in corporate communications and PR. He is the founder of Michael Walsh Communications, and he has advised single and multifamily offices on branding, reputation, and crisis response, and it brings a seasoned insider's view. We're going to keep today's conversation very open and conversational. It's going to be engaging and fast-paced, and that's why we do them live. And yes, we do have two Michaels, so I will be using your first and last names so that we keep things clear. And for all of you that are streaming in live, we would love to include you in the conversation. So feel free to drop your Q&As in the chat, and we'll do our best to weave those into our narrative. So we will get started, and I would love to start with you, Michael Thrasher. Can you tell us a bit more about the editorial lens at Modus and what drew you to focus on family offices in particular?
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks so much for having us. And yeah, we also tried to coordinate. I wanted to wear a blue shirt also, but we failed at that. So what is Modus News? I've been a journalist, like you said, for several years. Much of that time I spent at Institutional Investor magazine. I was writing about, like the name suggests, public and corporate pensions, endowments, foundations. But I was also spending quite a lot of time writing about asset managers and their engagement with those investors. But what was happening in the background was I was realizing, or at least anecdotally coming across, more people who were leaving some of these places to go and work for family offices. And I just thought that was so interesting. These are estimations ultimately, but if you think about the number of offices there are now, and that number is expected to increase, and you think about the average number of professionals, people they employ full time, let alone the many others that they work with, there's at least several thousand or more people who are sort of falling in a crack. They sort of feel journalistically a little underserved. If they aren't part of the investment staff or reading things like Institutional Investor and other places, or they aren't your sort of typical private wealth manager, there is just a short list of at least frequently high quality reporting about the things and people and companies that they're interested in, let alone about each other, right? And so I just felt really excited about that as a journalist, and saw an opportunity for new business. So I started Modus News.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And as a subscriber to Modus, I know it's amazing. I look forward to every Friday where I get it in my inbox. So glad your journey led you to the world of family offices. And that brings me to you, Michael Walsh. You've been behind the scenes of so many family office communication strategies. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, what you're doing now, and where you see the greatest need?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with Mr. Thrasher again. And again, I encourage anyone on this call, sincerely, subscribe to Modus. It's a really valuable tool and insights in the family office world. Well worth subscribing to. But yeah, as you said, I've been doing PR and communications for more than 25 years. The last dozen or so really focused on the family office, multifamily office, ultra high net worth space. And it's been a really interesting journey, just in the last decade or so, to see how the needs and the opportunities that are before family offices have really evolved. And I work with family offices, multifamily offices, anywhere from 2 billion in assets under management up to, or nearly 100 billion. And it's, just as the old saying goes, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. But the needs and the reasons they are engaging, and they are engaging more and more frequently in various types of communications, whether it's with the media or social media or you name it, it's really unique to them. But typically it revolves around wanting visibility because they have insights to share, right? They're proud. They particularly for family offices who've done this well, they want to share what they know in a truly altruistic way, but they also want to learn, right? They want to, how do I navigate this new world of social media, this new world of AI, this new world of, which media can I trust, which media can I not trust? Yeah. So it's been a really interesting evolution to help guide these families to how to appropriately and effectively utilize the various media channels we have in the world today. I'm excited to explore that further with everyone today.
Yeah, likewise. And I'm sure, even though you've been doing it for, 25 years, it's ever evolving, these new media forms daily. And so it's wonderful that you have that acute expertise. And from a data perspective, just analyzing the data that we keep for family offices, it's been really fascinating as well over the past 5 years to see the increase in the number of families that now have websites and the visibility on LinkedIn. It's definitely changing, as you said. So I'd love to kind of open things up just high level, and you spoke about this, Michael Walsh, but to open it up to either one of you, why this visibility now? Why are we seeing family offices step into the public eye, and really what's behind the shift?
You want to take first stab at it, Mike? Otherwise, I'm happy to jump.
Michael, I think you should take first stab at that one.
All right, fair enough. Well, like I was saying before, the reasons are really specific to the family office, and sometimes they refer to themselves as family offices, but sometimes they're just ultra high net worth families of wealth that have insights to share, that want to learn, particularly if it's relatively new wealth. If a business owner or entrepreneur has had a liquidity event and suddenly they're in this league of the family office league that they weren't in before, there's a heck of a lot to learn, right? And there's so many channels now that are available to family office to do that learning, whether it's social media, gaining insights from publications like Modus, webinars like this. There's just so many opportunities. But the guidance I usually get them is, before a family office or a very successful family gets engaged with putting themselves out there, either to learn or to share, is really to know your why. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do this, right? You don't have to put your family, yourselves, your kids, your name out there just because lots of other families are creating websites or doing it. Really know your why, right? And for some of them, again, it's to share. It's that altruism. They want to share insights. They want to share what they've learned. They want to help other families like them. For others, it's just they want to build, it can be, frankly, lonely when you are an extremely successful family. There's a lot of fears. There's a lot of isolation. There's especially if you're someone who maybe didn't come from wealth, but now you have wealth, it can be a very isolating experience. And there is a craving to connect with other families and individuals like them. Not only to share insights and perspectives, but just to feel like you're not alone on this island of success that you built. And of course, there's, families who want to connect with other families, to explore potential deals and to bring together, their assets to pursue future entrepreneurial opportunities. So every family has their own unique reason for doing it. But again, my advice is to really understand your why. And if you don't have a good why, you don't have to. You can be quiet. You can protect your privacy, but know your why and make sure your family, other members of your family, whether it's a spouse or children or whomever, is aligned with that why. Because once you're out there, you want to do in a consistent, targeted, purposeful way, right? You want to be known for certain themes or certain capabilities, right? and you want to be consistent in how you do it, whether it's sharing things on your own website or connecting with the media or having social media conversations that, you want to be consistent. So really understand your why and the purpose for doing it, and making sure everyone in the family is aligned is really important.
I love that. And I'm sure for families who are really passionate about certain initiatives and that's their why, when they elevate their presence in that sense, I'm sure they're being leaders and attracting other like-minded families. And I feel, from my perspective, there's so much collaboration going on, and it can be really encouraging when it's geared towards really impactful missions and whys. So thank you for that insight. And also, I imagine your work, Michael Walsh, is highly, bespoke and nuanced, given that no two family offices are quite alike, and you really have to kind of custom the approach given their objective in why they're choosing to raise their profile. And
it's very specific, and that's the first step, to really step back and have a conversation with someone like myself or some other consultant, and with your own family, like, why do we want to do this, and what is the outcome we want to have happen? And it's worth saying, if you do it well and you're successful, can you deliver on the expectations? Like, if you are going to be a thought leader in the space, if the media are going to be reaching out to you, if you are going to have other families wanting to connect with you, meet with you, do you have the time and appetite to fulfill those expectations, right? Visibility and transparency and putting yourself or your family's name out there is a commitment to an extent to deliver on expectations from those you're communicating with. You're now a thought leader. You are now a resource for the family office community. And is that a role you want to have?
Yeah, really, really good things to think about. And I like that you bring up the importance of consistency, and really it just draws back to that mission statement. Yeah. Michael Thrasher, anything to add? I know this is Michael Walsh's, world of expertise, but anything you'd like to add before I move on?
I think what Michael articulated is right. I would add that I sort of personally, and this is perhaps because Modus is really primarily intended for the professionals working for, especially single family offices, but also other types. Like this adage that, like, if you've seen one office, you've only seen one, I think is, it's not incorrect, because offices are an extension of a family and every family is unique. But the offices themselves, like many of these companies and entities, like they have actually like pretty similar problems. Like they don't have, I think this has at least some utility. I feel like they're not in many ways that different from any small business that's already been pretty successful. Like there's only so many resources, they've got, and in many cases, quite a lot of resources, but not unlimited resources. Yeah. They've got a limited number of people, and therefore hours in the days, weeks, months. And they're just trying to figure out the best way to achieve, whatever that mission or objectives are of the principal and other family members, the beneficiaries. But I also think if that's the way I think about it, and I'm a journalist, not someone consulting them, so this is obviously a little different. Having said those things, like a lot of times they sort of, like, the offices fall into like a few buckets, and that really like gives them that's actually, it sort of quickly gives them direction for who and why, or I guess like the why that Michael was talking about. Like what is the incentive to engage with the media or be on social media or do any of these things? For some, it's like pretty simple, right? Like if it's a multifamily office and this is a business, this is a for-profit business, there's incentive to be out there and educate people about what you do and how you do it. And also, I think increasingly what really differentiates you, because to have something like family office services 5 years ago might have felt differentiating if for no other reason than like in name, right? But now so many people do something like that. How many people are really doing that well, and what's different about what they're doing, either as a sort of supplemental service to a single family office, or really ultimately as like an ultra high net worth private wealth client. There's a lot of incentives for those firms to be out there and talk to the press, and a lot of them do. And then there's like the sort of in between, which is like the family offices that might have their own asset management business, or they might be very active, their investment office, and so they're out there looking for other families. They want to if they're a GP, find other investors, or if they aren't, but they're still very active in that space, just like find akin people. Like Michael was saying, like a lot of people feel like pretty alone, and or they know there are other offices out there, but they don't really, they struggle to sort of create that like connective tissue when it comes to investments. And then for the single family offices, there's like a million subcategories of these sort of things. Like even if you don't have a terribly complicated investment program, or you don't even have like an operating company anymore, right? To sort of be a leader, like in your own sort of business sphere. Like maybe you have a foundation that, is not just your money, but is doing a lot of good, and you're interested in like attracting other people that might be interested in contributing to it. Since you've already put in so much time and effort and energy in establishing that and these causes that it's supporting or whatever. So there's actually, it's funny. I felt like there were a lot of reasons, but now that we're here talking about it, I actually think that the list of reasons that you might want to engage with somebody or something for family offices, regardless of what they look like or their size, that list actually, now that we're here talking about it, is actually maybe a bit longer than even I appreciated.
Yeah. That's what I'm realizing too. And I think it's because, just to address what both of you have said, there is no one size fits all. And as the sector continues to grow, I think that connectivity and learning from each other and finding those best practices from aligned families is so important. And I love Ron Diamond. When he speaks, he often alludes to a conference in which he had probably 100 family offices in the room, and he asked them all to define what is a family office, and they all have their own unique answers, and it means something different, and they do come in all shapes and sizes. But as the sector continues to grow and carry this presence, this importance, I think developing best practices, learning from each other, collaborating is becoming so increasingly important. And so, yeah, just what you both provide, I think is so needed, and it's exciting times. So to shift our conversation a little bit about, seeing this increase in visibility, it obviously is going to come with a bit of a balancing act. There's going to be some risk with that. There's going to be some reward. And how do you really balance? Maybe this is a great one. We can start with Michael Walsh again. How do you find that balance between privacy and presence?
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to the, why we're doing this. But I think it's just making sure everybody's comfortable in the family or the consultants you work with, that in today's day and age, once you're out there, right? Especially if you're a family that historically has not done it. So I think it is initially a gut check. Like even in the best case scenario, what does this look like, right? To be featured in the media, to have, and once you're in the media, or you're substantial presence on social media, getting unsolicited calls, and people are going to be wanting making relationships with you that you may or may want to make. So I think it's a gut check of what you're comfortable with, but it's also scenario playing. What's the worst case scenario, right? How could this go wrong? What could this look like when it, and what are we comfortable with, right? The media, Modus would never do this, but other media sometimes publishes things you don't want them to publish. And are we okay with that? What's the worst case scenario, right? Or if there's people on social media that are reaching out that you don't want reaching out to. So really playing out, how could this go south? And what might that look like? And what level of comfort do we have with that, right? Of that exposure. And just making sure everybody in the family and your advisors are uncomfortable with that. I will say that, the particularly more traditional media, the media is not necessarily out to get you. In fact, the vast majority of the time, they're not, right? They're just doing a job, right? They don't necessarily have an axe to grind. But again, I often say media are friendly, but they're not necessarily your friends, right? They're not out to do you a favor, right? They're out to report news or to cover this industry, whether it's good or bad. And if you have something positive and great to share, hopefully they'll do that. But if there's something going on with your family or your business that may not be what necessarily you want the world to see, the media can and should cover that. Right. And that is the agreement you have when you reach out to them. So it's really gut checking, what level of comfort do we have
Yeah.
whether it's good, what we actually want to communicate getting out there. But when things can and do kind of go south, or it's not quite what you want to share, are we
Yeah.
okay with what are the ramifications of that for myself, for my kids, right? Now and in the future? Because once, particularly on social media, if there's something come out, and I can't tell you how many clients I've had who've had articles or posts that are years old, and they're just desperate for finding ways through search engine optimization to push that article down, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So that's something to be cognizant of.
I'm curious, do you find, I mean, once you take that step, is there any going back, or is it's kind of, you're out there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you or your family, your name is in the media and you're out there on the internet, especially if it's, more of a major media or respected industry media, you're kind of out there. And usually it's good. Again, I don't want to scare people. 98% of the time, it's a good thing. You did this for a reason. You engaged with the media for a reason. And usually it goes the way you want. Again, if you go into it thoughtfully.
Yeah.
But once it's out there, it's out.
Yeah. Well, Michael Thrasher talking about, intentional, really careful journalism, and that careful coverage, and you're on the other side of the media equation. Like, what advice do you have for families that want to engage with journalists, but also remain in control of their story? Is that possible?
I suppose. I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is that, to Michael's point, the value of journalists and journalism is, I think there's like two pillars oftentimes, or sort of buckets of stories when you're talking about journalism. There's exploratory analysis, and journalism that's, telling someone something new that's like pretty benign oftentimes, or exciting or interesting or whatever. And then there's really like the main pillar, which is really like accountability.
Yeah.
And these are two things that I think all good journalists are thinking about all the time in every conversation that they're having. So, including Modus. So Modus is certainly not afraid to publish something that someone doesn't necessarily like. But I also think that there's, the best journalists and organizations are also thinking thoughtfully about that. Writing something negative for the point of someone clicking on it is, that those stories have a short shelf life and not a ton of utility anyways. And if you do too many of those, so will your career as a reporter. So that's what I'd sort of say about that part. I think like, at least directionally, like what Michael said is true also, that, journalists are friendly. Most people are, a lot of them that are good or charismatic. But they are much closer to, this is also an imperfect way to describe my own profession, but like most of them are much closer to missionaries than mercenaries. Like, these are people that care. They're usually pretty smart. They care deeply about serving their readers, and that is really like ultimately the North Star. So families have to understand that, right? I'm in a little bit of a unique position at Modus because there's only one of me. I only have so many hours in the day. And so I have to be really thoughtful about that time. I don't have an enormous amount of time to be doing investigative things anyways. But a lot of times, I'll be honest, like, I don't actually think that a lot of times, like, many families are that interesting, right? Like, Modus is really for the professionals working at the office. And that's sometimes the family members and others, but is sometimes not.
Yeah.
So I'm not, short of someone who has already reached a sort of level of public attention, and there's a lot of billionaires and people who are already being written about because of their operating companies, because of their philanthropy, because of their influence in politics, and like all these things. But that list is actually pretty short, right? Of people that are like getting written about. Like there's like, if you went down like the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, the 50 richest people suck up like 90% of the oxygen. there's like hundreds of people on that list, and most of those people have a family office of some kind.
Absolutely.
So there's like quite a lot of people who are nonetheless have been like very successful and have interesting things to share, have great observations about like the industry where they made their money and or about markets, and as well as like their peers, and how people like them are making a difference, if not in their own office, then and or the world. So there's a lot of reasons to talk to journalists, and the other thing I guess I would say that I was thinking about when Michael was talking was like, you can also like always never return a phone call.
Yeah.
Like there are some people who very politely say thanks for the call, but I'm not interested. There's a million sort of degrees to engage with a journalist. Some of the people who are some of the best resources to me over the years are people whose names have never appeared in a story.
I bet. Yeah.
And there's so many ways to engage a journalist, and I think that just like a journalist, like I'm constantly thinking about people I'm talking with and trying to build trust in this person as a resource.
Right.
That people should also be doing that with journalists. It's really difficult to sort of like immediately make some assumption. Like relationships take a lot of investment. Any professional relationship, and it's not any different with a reporter.
Very interesting. So I know there have been a few questions from the audience, and again, I promised I would include everyone. So we've got Ron with us. Let's see. Are we able to pull that? Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you for joining us. So I appreciate the kind words. Danielle, you're doing great work for our industry. Thank you. And I highly recommend a subscription to Modus. It's excellent. Question for both Michaels. How much money, in your opinion, do you need to have a single family office? And it continues and it's cut off, but I believe, knowing Ron, he's going to ask him, what inning are we in the evolution of family offices?
Well, that's the $1 million, if not $1 billion question, right? So I've heard over the years, I've heard so many numbers thrown out there. At what point does it economically make sense to have a single family office? There's no right or wrong answer. It's really for your family. Certainly it's in the hundreds of millions, right? Some people will say it might be as low as 200, 300, 400 million. So others will be saying, well, it's for sure $1 billion or more. Because there are a lot of multi-family offices. So if we're talking about true single family office, it's just your family and the infrastructure and the people you need to hire to run it. And there's a lot of really good multi-family offices right now that can give you all those services, but with much greater depth of resources and talent to help you manage it. So it's a question for your family of, am I going to be better served by a multi-family office, or do we really need to do our own thing, right? And to do your own thing, again, I would say certainly upper hundreds of millions, if not north of $1 billion, is when it starts to make the most sense. But it's unique to each family and really how bespoke they want the services to be to them, because a multi-family office will connect you with other families. They could have hundreds of staff members and all sorts of opportunities for you, but it's not just for you. It's not catered exclusively to you and your family's needs. So, but again, I would say certainly north of, 400 or 500 million before it kind of economically makes sense. And some people would say considerably more than that.
I'd be curious, before I get Michael Thrasher's opinion on this. I see just many people calling themselves family offices where they may be service providers. They may not have quite that net worth, but they're claiming single family. In this world of helping with the perception and the media, does that bother you, or are you?
Yeah, it is a little loose, the definition, sometimes, because I hear family office, I'm thinking a single family office.
Right.
But a lot of multifamily offices will call themselves a single family office or just a family office. Like, well, you're more than just one family's office. So it doesn't bother me, but it is a little looser, the definition of what a family office is these days.
Yes.
Maybe I'm more traditional, but I think of a family.
Yes.
It could be multiple generations of a family, but they're an office to help them manage their wealth and sustain it for hopefully generations to come. But yeah, it has to become a little more loose. But in the end, grand scheme of things, not a big deal.
Yeah. Someone once used the word nebulous, and I really liked that because it is shifting and a bit ambiguous at the moment. But Mike Thrasher, do you have some thoughts to add to Ron's question and maybe what inning you feel we're in this evolution?
I think it really depends on if you are built. I think it's helpful to think about offices in two relative categories. Like, is this an investment office, or is this, fulfilling basically all the things X investment management that a lot of the offices do, and why many of them are like actually created, right?
Yes.
Um, that makes a huge difference. If you're a family, say your investment portfolio is like a few $100 million, but you've effectively outsourced your investment management, you could hire, depending on your needs, actually, like you could hire like if that list isn't terribly long, you could hire like a pretty robust staff,
Yeah.
if you want to keep your expenses somewhere near 1% a year, a few $1,000,000 a year or whatever. But investment offices do, if the ambition, or they aspire to have a really like bespoke program, and there's like multiple sleeves of their portfolio that they're really building themselves, even in conjunction with fund managers. Those professionals that have experience and are also willing to work in a family office are very expensive. So, and they have benefits, they have compensation benefits at asset managers that families just have a tough time competing with, right? If you want somebody to like run a really good private equity program that used to be an MD at one of the largest alts firms, like that person has so much access to, they're dealing with like a different deal volume, probably a higher salary. They've got there's the carry they earn, there's co-invest opportunities, there's like a lot of things that just like when you think about that in aggregate, it's hard for a lot of most families don't have the scale to via like offer something like that. So it sort of depends, like, is it an investment office, and what is it that really, why is it doing, what is the mission of that? And then, if not, then that you could be in like a totally different scenario. It's like really hard to answer. I feel like I started Modus only like 4 months ago, but it just gets harder, and it feels like a question actually that's like harder and harder to answer. Like everyone's in the spot.
Yes, it's taken us down the rabbit hole, but it's changed. It's always going to be changing. The baseball analogy is fun. I think, I interviewed Ron 2 years ago, and we were in the second or the first inning, and we're progressing along, but it's going to be exciting to see how it plays out. And I think, depending on the family's why. And is it investment driven? Is it mission driven? And how much engagement do you have from the family members? How involved are they? Or is it a staff, like the audience that you're writing to, Mike, that they're really looking to learn?
That's it. Actually, you brought up something, that I think is that I hear people talk about, but I think like not really talked about enough or acknowledged enough, which is that like these offices, just like any like small business and family, like they have a life cycle. Yes. So like the right answer for the office, like what it does and its structure and everything like that might have been fine for the previous 30 years. Most of them haven't been around that long, but call it whatever number that is. But then once you get to the second generation, and certainly beyond, there's so many people, and like the complexity changes, and the needs of like this pool of assets in theory are changing. And so, like if at one point it was the first generation wealth creator, and they were really focused, both like their time, energy, and also the resources of an office on like growing that portfolio, right? Like you might have the certain professionals and things might have, and having people that might have been worth the expense, but in 20, but maybe today that's not the case, and maybe in like 15 years that's not the case. That's like these things evolve, like anything else. These things are evolving.
Yeah.
So we could answer the question today, and then like for an office, and then like it could change, like, and it should change. It should change based on what they really need.
To be continued. And I do love hearing the stories of each unique family. And so many times they have, experienced problems, dynamics, and they've created the solution. and then in wanting to share that solution with other families so they don't have to go down that same journey. And even the evolution of some single family offices like the Rockefellers, who learned how to do it so well and have now, extended those services to others. And so just, the constant evolution. And
and I would say it never ceases to amaze me as long as I've done this, and many family offices I work with, is how willing they are to sort of share their knowledge, just to share the knowledge, right? To help families like them. There is a real sense of altruism with these families, which, the broader public may not understand, but it never ceases to amaze me that how willing they are, and how they just want to help, how they want to help other families that are maybe new to this journey. And that's a really wonderful thing. These are some really good people. And the only thing I would add to that, we talked about the why, like, why are you doing this? Like, what is the purpose? What goal do you want to achieve as a family to putting yourself out there? But sort of the akin to the why is the what, right? It's like, well, I want to do this because I want to share my insights, and I want to help other families like mine, and I want to meet these other families. But the next question is really, okay, well, what specifically do we want to share? What is, you got to lean into your strengths, right? As a family, what do you know a lot about? What are you really good at, right? Because sometimes you'll just say, well, I just want to share my thoughts about running a family office. That's nice, but what about it? That's a really broad, like, what aspect of a family? Is it the investment aspect? Is it the heir preparation? Is it wealth transfer? Is it philanthropic initiatives? Is it impact investing? There's so many places you can go. Concierge services, you name it. So it's like, what are we actually knowledgeable about? What do we actually have to share that isn't just going to add noise, or is going to be sort of already out there a million times over? So that's something else to think through. Like, what are our strengths as a family? What do we have to share, whether it's with other families or the media, that we can really own as true experts, and not just another voice saying the same thing?
Yeah. Well, and for those who have identified that why, and they've found what they want to share, what do you feel are smart, sustainable ways that they can actually begin sharing their voice? Any recommendations of ways to get started?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of what we talked about on this call. There is reaching out to the media, whether it's Modus, and there's other kind of family office, ultra net worth focused media out there. There's trade and industry media. There's all the way up. You can go to the Wall Street Journal, or you can go to Bloomberg or Barron's, you name it. So there's the traditional media outlet, which is great, but really understand what you're getting into, right? First of all, if you reach out to Mike or any other editor, reporter, you got to have something special to say. You can't just reach out and say, hey, Wall Street Journal, reporter, I'd love to share my thoughts about running a family office. Well, what about it? It's got to be timely. It's got to be relevant to what's going on in the world. So, of course, there's traditional media. Once you know what you have to say and kind of put it through the gut check of, is this unique? Is it differentiated? But there's social media, lots of social media channels where consistency is key. Having a theme or a knowledge area that you want to own is key to have that consistency. Yes. Through social media, there's also, you can do videos, you can do webinars like this, you can just do text-based posts. Social media is probably the biggest one. And then, of course, if your family has a website, you can put content there, which is findable by search engines, and you can direct people from social media to longer form articles or videos or what have you on your own website. So it's really that combination of traditional media, both sort of big media and trade media, social media, and your own website. Some families they might even have an email newsletter, something like that. Yes. But I find sort of as a starting point, it's more often than not social media. But again, be careful about picking, TikTok is very different than LinkedIn. Like who do you want to be connecting with?
Yes.
Like who do you want to be connecting with, and where are they likely to be? Yeah. What is the right tone, right? TikTok has a very different tone than LinkedIn. What kind of conversation do you want to have? But I find most families, social media with some thoughtful, exploration before you do it is where they start.
I think that's amazing. And I am encouraged by, those who do have something to say, who are doing exciting things, who want to be thought leaders. And, this is a fun lunch and learn, initiative where we're kind of talking very candidly. We also have a different format where we do master classes. And this year's focus is really to elevate those families that have something to say so that, others can learn from them, and we can really elevate what they're doing in the space. And it's, again, my chosen outlet is LinkedIn because it's the audience I'm connecting with. But yeah, you bring up a lot of good points in terms of audience and having that something to say and being consistent. There's a great question. Cody Meltzer asks, what about podcasts, and are they changing the space?
Yes and yes. So podcasts are a huge opportunity. Even though podcasts have been around for a long time, for a couple decades, and they were in fashion kind of a long time ago, and they kind of went away. Interesting, they kind of went away for several years, and then I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, they kind of resurfaced in a big way. I love podcasts. They're more in depth. I mean, for all the reasons everyone loves podcasts, right? They're a deep for all the mini super short social media posts and videos out there. To have a deeper exploration of a concept is refreshing, and it's needed in this hyper paced world we live in. So podcasts, whether you want to create your own podcast, many families create their own podcasts. Again, assuming they have a topic that they can kind of own, that they're deeply expert in. Of course, there's many other podcasts out there that they can engage with. So yes, that is definitely an option available. But again, all the same cautions are there of once you're out there, and podcasts can be an hour long, and you may not necessarily like everything you said, every question asked. So you have to be comfortable with really going in depth and having that be out there in perpetuity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always curious too. And when I listen to podcasts, which I absolutely love, I just consume knowledge in the car. My kids are going to be little sponges and know the sector so well. But yeah, you do have to think, is this editable or is it live? And what you say. Yeah.
What are they willing to edit? Yeah.
Exactly. Mike Thrasher, any insights, any thoughts on what we've been talking about, podcasts? And
Yeah, I mean, podcasts are just another medium, right? I think podcasts are amazing. Podcasts and video is amazing for certain things. And there's also like tons of flavors of these. I mean, I think like people ask me if there's going to be a Modus podcast. The short answer is not in the immediate future, because I feel like I barely have time to send a newsletter and run this business. So I don't, maybe someday. But if I was going to do something like that, I actually just think about things like Modus in general. I think there's still like a lot of space for more of these things. Like there's just like so many different programs out there that have their own sort of angle, style, objectives, and then like also like their own like incentives, their own ownership, their own most people aren't doing a podcast just like for the hell of it. There is some reason that you're doing that, right? So I think like you as a guest like might or might not care about that much, or you should at least acknowledge and think about that a little bit, because that is going to ultimately impact like the programming itself, right? Like I probably, if I had to guess, ask people like some tougher or more probing questions than others. I could be wrong about that. Like there's certainly that's certainly not like a prerequisite for a good program, obviously. But like that's something that people should think about. It's like, is this the right medium for like this thing that I have to say or that I want to say? And then also like, well, once you've like decided on some medium, like there might be a better person for this thing, whatever it is that you feel compelled to talk about, there might be a better person to navigate that with than another.
Yeah. I'm inspired to now do some research and find what family office podcasts are out there, and maybe share that. If anyone in our audience has any to recommend, it would be fun. We do a monthly newsletter, and yeah, it's always nice to share those resources. because no two voices are quite alike, but it is a great medium, at least for a mom like me who's in the car often, to just absorb and digest that information and learn from thought leaders. So, we talked a little bit about the inning that we were in. That was Ron's question, and just kind of the evolution of the space. Any thoughts of the changes? Like, you both have been in the industry, Mike Thrasher, writing, journalism, Mike Walsh, PR. What are the biggest changes you say you've seen in the last 5 years, and what changes do you anticipate in the next 5 years?
Well, I would say the changes in terms of, family offices or aspiring family offices is just the proliferation of family office or successful families putting themselves out there. Yeah. I mean, they used to be very, very private, and many still are, but there seems to be a greater appetite to wanting to be part of the conversation. And again, the reasons are, they're different, but they're usually good. It's because they want to connect with other families like them. They want to share their knowledge, or they want to learn. It's usually you can want to share your knowledge and want to learn at the same time. Those are not mutually exclusive. And I don't see that going away. I see that continuing because we have so many ways. When I started out in this business, there was no podcast, there was no social media, email was in its infancy. There's now so many ways to share and connect, which is wonderful. Yeah. Right? It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, the isolation I was speaking about before that many of these families have endured, it can be less now. Right? There's ways to connect with families like you. There's ways to connect with advisors that understand your needs. But again, do it thoughtfully. Yes. Do it purposefully, thoughtfully and purposely. Don't just like, well, I need to get out there because everybody else is. No. Get out there for a reason. Get out there and with your eyes wide open. Once you share your perspective or share your family, and once you're known as a very successful family, you're known as a very successful family, and you need to balance that appetite for visibility and connection with an inherent lack of or a sacrificing of some degree of privacy.
Yeah. When you talk about opportunity, I've seen in probably the last 5 years a real explosion in opportunity as well through the event space, and we have many partners who we collaborate with, and there's just like there's no one size for the families. There very vast variety of family office conferences, but a few of the better ones I've attended, I've really been inspired by some of the families and the talks that they give, and the way that, just like we were talking about earlier, they're doing it to share best practices and learn from each other. And some of those can be just great opportunities for families not to feel so alone and to learn from each other.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. The proliferation of in-person or online or in person is really can be a great thing for these families and a great way to connect in a very intimate sort of a way.
Yeah. Speaking of events, Mike Thrasher, I know you have just recently attended an event in Miami. Do you have any thoughts about what you've kind of seen in the past 5 years, what lies ahead, or any thoughts on the event scene?
Well, this is a little tough for me to answer, or it should be. It comes with a lot of salt and like maybe some asterisks, which is like, I've only really been focused on reporting about this group of investors and offices for full-time for 4 months. Everything before that was, I think I was like most journalists, somebody who, because I was writing about asset management or some part of wealth management or whatever, I was sort of a tourist to the space. Like I crossed paths with people who either work with offices or people that have an office, right? They've become quite successful working in asset management. And I don't know, when I think about like what's different, the biggest difference is just there's just so many more offices that they're in North America, I don't know what, the latest estimate is there's something like roughly like 3,500 offices, single family offices. And when you think about that, and I think there's going to be, 30 or 40% more than that over the next 5 years, that's definitely enough people to like build a conference business or to build a services business or to offer solutions for. And, there's all these sort of segments within like the family office segment. So for like the largest families that are investing directly in companies and are pretty sophisticated, like the investment banks in recent years have formalized or created have created groups to engage with those families.
Right.
There's all kinds of service providers, investment or otherwise, personal services and everything else. There's just I don't love the word professionalization, but for lack of a better one, like that's what's happening. Like family offices this is not just sort of like the most extreme of a cottage industry. It's sort of like morphing into an industry. There's like an entire ecosystem that's maturing. Actually, like I feel like pretty rapidly around this group, because the growing number of them is hardly a secret, right? And what they want and need is also not a secret. So if people think that they can deliver that, and especially if they can deliver that and make a new business out of it, or turn some cost center of their business into a profitable part of their business, like people are going to do that. So that to me is like the real out of the 50,000 foot view of like what I know has been changing in recent years, and that over recent months I've grown to appreciate more, is maybe a way to put it.
Yeah. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but knowing the agenda, if say, for example, in conferences, who is throwing it, what's their agenda? We see more and more of the big banks offering family office services, and they'll throw elaborate things, but there's a very clear intention, and they can be very commercial. Yet if that's okay and being with other families and it's clear and it's transparent, I think, it's fine. But knowing what the agenda is at each of these events and who you'll be in the room with, because there's very varying types. Yeah. And as it grows, it will just continue. It looks like
the most successful events totally, they're pretty conscious about that, right? I mean, I've attended, when I was working at Institutional Investor, I attended some family office events in Switzerland and in California. I've attended like small, like not, I guess technically commercial events, because service providers will invite families or like types of employees at single family offices together. I've attended things like that, as small as like a couple dozen people. I've attended like some private things that just like families have done themselves, or people that work in the family office industry in some other capacity, like they're like a consultant to these people or whatever. And in most cases, they're the main box that like the family offices really want to check is like, do I have time to engage with the other people like me? Because it's just not very often that there's like a bunch of them in one place.
Yes.
Even though there's like a million conferences and not a million, even though there's a growing number of conferences and things and different types of organizations and people creating those, like the common theme is like, these people want to be together in a room, and we can either do that to improve our brand, or to ultimately sell them something, or to just make money through sponsorship, or some combination of those things. And like, that's like kind of the secret sauce to these things. It's like, it's that sounds so dumb, but like, is it actually valuable to the families? Like if people go there and there's people like them, and there's at least enough time for them to spend with each other, and they're learning something, like you've checked in many ways, like kind of the only box you need to check.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. And I've seen some really cool experiential things, and that's again, informing a bond and having fun, and not just sitting and not having the opportunity to meet and exchange. So
yeah, totally. Some of the stuff is pretty interesting. Like, I think this is ultimately like a good thing.
Yeah.
Like more conferences mean it will be more competitive.
Yes.
And so people will improve so people will, at least in theory, right, like improve the conference that they're responsible for.
Absolutely. There was a question earlier. I apologize that I asked my own, but Alexi, thank you so much for joining in. What's your experience with cross-cultural aspects of working with family office, say Middle East, Europe versus USA? And actually, that is a really great question. I'm curious to both of you. When you're doing your coverage, Michael Thrasher and Michael Walsh, when you do your PR work, are you working cross-culturally, or do you have a US focus?
So I personally, this is an interesting question. I think there's a really huge opportunity, frankly, for people like me or Mike, for specializing in cross-cultural, working cross-culturally with family offices, because there's obviously a great many family offices around the world, and they're increasing, they're proliferating everywhere, not just in the U.S. Personally, most of my clients are in the U.S. I will say I work with some media outlets in the UK. There's a number of, specifically in the UK. Spears comes to mind, which is a kind of a luxury, ultra high net worth publication. But I wish I did more. I wish I did have some clients, whether it's in the Middle East or South America or Mexico or what have you. I think would be fascinating. I just haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah. I find it really interesting as well, especially as well. Oh, sorry, I just had a little echo there. But seeing families wanting to invest and have connections in those particular geographies that they can trust and can help.
And many frankly, there's many successful families in the U.S. or around the world who have homes in Europe. They have homes in Dubai. They might have a home in Buenos Aires, or Singapore, what have you. And so they have roots there as well. So I think I would love the opportunity to do more of that, but haven't had a lot of it so far.
Anything from your perspective, Mike Thrasher?
Yeah, I'm in kind of the same boat as Michael. I mean, I think largely I've lived in New York for I think like almost 12 years, and because I've been here and because I've reported predominantly on financial services, especially like when I first started Modus, out of the couple hundred people that first signed up, it definitely, there was a disproportionate number of family offices and others who were like in the Northeast, worked in or very closely with principals from financial services and things like that. It's definitely diversified as the number of subscribers has grown to like, it's just like a hair under like 1,100 now, I think. But it's still predominantly North America for sure. I think about maybe a third of subscribers are split elsewhere. And it's like, places you'd expect, like lots of folks in London, Switzerland, Singapore, Hong Kong, and some of these like sort of typical places where people, or at least like Modus subscribers, I should say, like a lot of the investment staff or people working for offices are oftentimes located in these places. So, yeah, I don't, it's like one of the things that it's like this nut that I'm eager to figure out how to crack at some point as a publication, because there are a lot of, in terms of regions, there's so many offices here in North America. So I guess I just sort of was lucky in the sense that this is the place where I already was, and there's a lot of people, but there's, globally, it's actually like divided pretty nicely. There's so many families in Europe, and they're also so different, like so many, they each region has its own nuances, right? And is it, perhaps maybe like a little bit different sort of like inning that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, I mean, the Middle East is like an especially interesting place because they're not nearly as many families, but their average like investment portfolio is probably much larger than especially like Europe and some other places. So that's, I sort of am always thinking through the lens of like other families, but also like asset managers and other people. So, the reporting and things that I'm interested in, like how you engage offices across regions could actually be like pretty materially different, at least theoretically. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have I also like don't have a ton of experience, and so maybe that wasn't a satisfying answer.
No, I think what it proves to us, because I agree. I mean, Family Office List has global coverage, but being a US based company, half of our offices are in the US, although we know for sure that they are everywhere. I think what our conversation here shows us is there's tremendous opportunity. And so maybe the next time we all talk, maybe we've cracked that nut and taken the leap cross borders. Yeah, well, I cannot believe I'm glancing up at the clock here. We are already at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful to everyone's time. You may have, hard stops at 2:00, but this has just been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate both of you joining us today. And for both of you, how can people stay in touch and follow and support your work?
Mike,
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, it's really easy to sign up for Modus. It's just modus.news. I ask a couple questions about people, but it's free. It goes to your inbox every Friday. It takes usually 10 minutes or less to read. There's always something. There's always exclusive reporting or something in there, as well as like other stories in journalism and investment research. Anything that I find that I think is relevant to people, I also stick in there, along with like some interesting jobs and occasionally some of my bad jokes. I don't know that I haven't sent one and like had anybody unsubscribe yet. So I don't know. I guess I'll keep that up too.
Yeah, you being you. And Michael Walsh.
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me is really LinkedIn. So
Awesome.
Michael Walsh, and again, my very cleverly named business, Michael Walsh Communications. So you can't, but yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to make new connections. Always happy to have a conversation, even just not as a client, just to be helpful. For just happy to engage with anyone who you want to think through a little bit or brainstorm about resources or contacts that would help them. This is somebody put in the chat here. This is very much more than most industries, a relationship built and dependent industry. And I'm happy to facilitate that however I can. And everyone should subscribe to Modus. It truly is an interesting newsletter. I look forward to reading it every week. So put a little plug in there. But I'm sure both Mike and I would be happy to connect with anyone on this call, and look forward to continuing the conversation. And thank you, Danielle, for setting this up. I love the topic, and we appreciate your interest in having us on.
Absolutely. And just a quick, before we sign off, today's session was brought to you by Family Office List. And if you're looking to explore our platform, you can go to our website, familyofficelist.org. We have a free trial. And for any of our participants today, there is a promo code LIVE20, which will get you 20% off through the end of this month. But I can't thank you enough. Thank you both, Michaels, for sharing your wisdom. And it was really fun. I hope to do this again with you.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Anytime.
Have a great
Anytime.
day.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.